Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to this episode of Holistic Healing with Lorrie. I'm so glad to be here with you. And today's episode, I'm going to share with you, I guess you could call it an awakening that I had, a big breakthrough, whatever you'd like to call it. And this happened a couple of weeks ago. And I do believe that part of the reason that it unfolded was because of an experiment, I guess, that I was called to do, that I felt pulled towards doing. And the reason that all of this is so important to everybody, but especially to those of you who are dealing with chronic symptoms, with chronic illnesses, is because it has to do with your quality of life. It has to do with your enjoyment of life. It has to do with your stress level. It has to do with really everything, every single part of you and of your life. So here's the experiment that I did. I did EFT tapping, which if you're not familiar with that, you can take a look at some of my other podcast episodes, or you can just Google it online and you'll find a ton of information about it. So I did EFT tapping for 3+ hours every day for 5 months, so for about 150 days. Now, I don't recommend doing it that much for most people unless you are really called to it. Now, I was really called to it. And what can happen for most people really is that it can tweak out your nervous system if you do it that much. You really want to stick to, depending on how sensitive your nervous system is and how much kind of tolerance you've built up to doing this kind of work, you want to stick with more like, a 10-minute session twice a day, or maybe up to an hour each day. But otherwise, you don't need to do that much. But again, I had started doing the tapping again and teaching it again and working with clients with it again. And it just felt like the right thing for me to do. So I'd wake up every morning, and while I was lying in front of my red light, I would tap, 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 and I would cry sometimes for hours. I would laugh. It was the whole gamut of experience, of emotions and experience. And I did go back through some quite traumatic experiences. And that was really interesting. Now, again, I felt comfortable and okay doing that because I feel safe enough in my body and in my surroundings, in my environment, and in my head, and my mental state was already solid enough, and my emotional state was already solid enough that I felt okay doing that. It wasn't comfortable, of course, but in a weird way, I don't know, I'm kind of weird, but in a weird way, it felt really good actually to do all this work. Now, I actually was also working with a very well-known EFT tapping coach. She's a rock star in that world and has been for decades now. And she actually, when I first told her that I was doing the, 3+ hours a day, most days it was more like 4+ hours a day. And she said, that's not a good idea. Your immune system's not going to take it well. Your nervous system's not going to take it well. And I said, thank you very much. But I do know myself, and this is what feels right for me to do right now. So I also knew, though, that if I did run into some trauma that I was working on, that I had her that was too much for me, then I had her to reach out to for that support. So again, working on really big, deep traumas. So one of the first things that I ended up uh, being called to work on, one of the first big traumas, was actually, I was, as this was kind of in my probably early 30s, I think, and I was running early in the morning in a place that I thought was completely safe, and I ended up getting attacked and pulled into the woods. I got away. Um, but that is definitely a traumatic event. And it kind of mirrored some themes that had been going on in my life in less obvious ways. And I was fine tapping on that on my own. It was a weird couple of days when I was tapping on that specifically. And it did take me probably about 3 or 4 days of pretty full sessions of tapping on that and kind of related things around that. So it was these big chunky things from my past that I was tapping on, including things from my present. And then again, about 5 months into it, I woke up one morning and I said, I'm not feeling pulled to do the tapping today. That's fine. And so I didn't. And I didn't do any tapping for probably about a week and a half. It wasn't like I was against it or anything. It was just that I felt full. And I didn't feel pulled to do it for that amount of, for that stretch of time. So then, and here's where it gets really juicy. After that week and a half, I was actually on the way to a yoga retreat in Mexico. And to get to the island that we were on for the retreat, it was a full day of travel, basically, because we landed in Cancun. So there was that plane trip. And and then we took a car for 2.5+ hours to get to the ferry, and then the ferry to the island, and then from the ferry drop off we take a taxi, which is actually a golf cart basically, or a side-by-side UTV, because they don't allow cars on the island. So then we take the UTV, the taxi, to the resort, to the hotel. So it was a very, very full day. And I had downloaded some audiobooks to listen to. And so on the plane, I started to listen to one about Mary Oliver because I love her poems. And I was like, oh, that doesn't really quite grab me right now. And then I realized that I had downloaded The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I don't know exactly how to pronounce his last name, but this is a book that I had read probably about 25 years ago. And I'd comprehended maybe about 1/10 of it. There were some passages that definitely made sense to me, but I was trying so hard to get them and to implement them that it was a difficult thing. I just wasn't ready for it at that point. So I started listening to that audiobook, and almost immediately, first of all, I was like, oh my God, the narrator, who actually was Eckhart, I didn't realize that until a little bit later, but the narrator talks so slowly and his voice is kind of weird, and So I had all these judgments about it pretty much straight away. But within a couple of minutes of listening, something started to resonate. Something started to wake up within me. And the book is about, and it's hard to talk about because it's so, what he's talking about and what I'm talking about to you here is the thing that can't be put into words properly, and that ultimately really shouldn't be put into words. But we'll see if I can get there with you. So, but what he talks about in the book is how being fully in your now connects you to your full, true, all that is being self. Universal, presence, whatever you want to call it. And not even connects you to that, but allows you to live that and to know that you are that. And it's definitely a felt experience. And so as I'm on the plane and I'm listening to what he's saying, and I'm not really comprehending the specific words, it was more like an overall feeling. So then we get to the car, and as we're driving in the car, one of the things that he talks about is how when you focus on being fully in the present moment, that's when you connect to presence. But what happens is that our mind starts to come in with thoughts about the future, or thoughts about the past, or judgments. And I started to watch my thoughts, and I was like, oh my God, he's right. I'm thinking about, meeting new people when I get there. I'm thinking about if I'm going to be able to do a lot of the classes, and I'm thinking about what I packed, and if it's, and making judgments about myself mostly. Now, I'd had awareness about the judgments for a while, but something happened during that car ride to my ego, my identity, my thinking mind, whatever you want to call it, and it just started to fall apart. And it was really interesting to watch. It was super uncomfortable. And the types of thoughts that were coming up were things like, but if I don't assert my identity and let people know who I am, if I really am just present and just allowing myself to be, as opposed to trying to let people know who I am, then they're not going to know that I'm important. They're not going to know that I'm lovable. They're not going to know that I can do all these things. And my identity just started to freak out because I kept being present and just watching these thoughts as opposed to getting into them. And a part of it was, since I've been perimenopausal, I haven't been wanting to do very much yoga or physical activity. And I have been very introspective. I haven't been, well, I'm honestly never super social, but I've been even less so lately, and just really feeling very introspective in a really sweet way. But I've been resisting all of that, but And also I hadn't been feeling as motivated as I used to feel. And I used to be, oh my goodness. So here's an example of the past, right? Because for as long as I could remember, I was, again, super motivated and excited about being physically active and wanting for people to see how dynamic I was and how good I am at yoga and all these different things like that. And so for me to drop that identity and to just be present and not try to impress upon people who I am or what I do was scary. So I was going through, or my ego or whatever was going through a lot of fear and all these things. So all this happened during that 2.5-hour car ride. It was like I was having this spiritual awakening as we were driving on this super bumpy, Mexican road with one woman, fellow retreat participant whom I knew a little bit already, and another woman that I didn't know, and then of course the driver. But I was just so quiet the whole time because I was still just listening and taking everything in. But the place that it got to eventually was this supreme freedom and liberation, really. Because and another realization that I had was that even though when I look back to the time before this big shift in that car ride in Mexico, when I look back to that time, and I was talking to a friend about this, and she asked me this question. She said, were you happy before you had this shift? And I had to think about that. And I went, well, you know what? If you had asked me then, I would have said, yeah, I am usually happy. But looking back, there had always been this underlying current of of needing to get somewhere, after I do this treatment, then I'll be happy or feeling better. I need to get there. I need for this many people who are in my program to get well. I need something. And it was always something out there in the future. And it wasn't really a cognitive thing of, I can't be happy until that happens, or I'm not fulfilled until that happens. But this underlying dissatisfaction with the present moment. Because I was always striving towards something. I was always trying to get to the next thing. Even when I was like fixing meals, even when I was just walking around in the house. And I realized this after this big shift, after this awakening. I realized that, when I was making meals, I was not in the moment of the making and I was not enjoying it. It was a chore. It was something that I had to do. And even sometimes the eating of the meals was just something that I needed to get done so I could move on to the next thing. And then I could move on to the next thing. And then I could move on to the next thing. And the thing is that when you're living your life that way, then you're never present. You're never fully present right now in this moment. You're always looking forward to something in the future, some place in the future, some time in the future when things will be done. or when you'll have achieved what you wanted to achieve. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't have goals or that you don't have intentions or that you don't do your treatments or that you don't work with your health coach or your doctor or whatever to move towards those goals. But allowing yourself to be in the present moment means that you're not deferring that happiness or that wholeness, right? That sense of wholeness. And that is one of the hugest things. It's like everything that I think that thing in the future, everything that I think the future is going to do for me is actually in that connection, that presence, that being that is in the right now. Now, when your body is doing super weird things in the now, or if you're experiencing a lot of pain in the now, then you can look at it in two different ways. One way is that it's harder to really drop into that presence of now. Another way that you can look at it and experience it is that those physical sensations are actually a tool, actually a vehicle for you to become more present and more rooted in your now. And in an upcoming episode, we're going to talk more about how you can be in the now with your body, with symptoms, in a way that it's not suffering. So I really appreciate you being here with me, and I hope that something, even if just one little part of my story of that big shift, of that awakening, if even just one teeny little part of that sparked a resonance within you, that is my hope. And some of you who are watching, you might, drop into presence regularly and know exactly what I'm talking about. And others of you who are watching, you might even be like, all right, she's crazy. I can't even go there. And that's fine too. That's totally fine too. Oh, and that's another, oh my goodness, amazing side effect of all of this is that I just don't care what other people think. I don't about me or what I'm doing. I'm not concerned about finances. I'm not concerned about all the things that I need to be doing. It'll creep in every once in a while, but when you bring your attention back to this present moment, and you're not thinking about the bills in the future, and you're not thinking about how the money is going to come in the future, and you're not thinking about what other people are thinking about you, because it just doesn't matter, because you're in the present moment, and because you know that from that place of beingness, none of that other stuff matters, because you are, period. Yeah. So, yeah, again, thank you. And please do make sure to subscribe. We are opening up registration for the next session of what used to be the Relief and Transformation course. It's now called the Heal course. And please do share the podcast with your friends, with anybody who you think will benefit from it. And I can't wait to see you next time.